Okay. Hi, and welcome to the last Fireside chat of the GovTech Summit, when I sit down with the Serbian Prime Minister, Brnabić, to talk a bit about how technology has helped her government deal with the coronavirus and what lessons that they've been drawing from the crisis. Now, I know for some of you, Serbia will not be a byword for technology, but dig a little bit deeper, and you'll find that Serbia has a wellspring of innovative talent. I'm not just thinking of course, Nikola Tesla, but also Mihailo Pupin, the man who effectively founded NASA and modern telecommunications. There is indeed a wellspring of technology innovation in the Serbian heartlands. And recently, The Economist talked about Serbia beginning to experience a technology boom. Those of us who've been watching Serbia for a while will argue that it's been going on for longer than this year. But as I sit down now to talk to the Prime Minister, it'd be interesting to hear exactly what it is that's coming together for Serbia at this very moment. Prime Minister, welcome, and I should also say happy birthday, because I believe it's your birthday.
Thank you very much. It is my birthday today, so thank you.
Fantastic. Now you have overseen a government over the last couple of years that has been at the forefront of technology adoption, and then suddenly came the crisis, which has thrown many governments off kilter. And I guess I'm curious in the broadest way to start by saying, how have you seen technology help you or even hinder you as you've had to lead a government through this crisis?
No, actually, the technology really helped us. So all of the investments that we made as a government into technology, e-government, startups, also research and development and innovation companies have really paid off during the COVID crisis. I think more so than anyone expected. So my advice to the governments throughout the world is, this is the right way to go. We are bound to have similar crises, if not due to healthcare, then for some other reasons. But technology really helps the government to act efficiently, to make decisions based on data, and also provide services to citizens and businesses, regardless of the fact if you can physically meet with them or not. As you have said, we have placed the information technology digitization as at the forefront of this government's work since 2016. And from then on, we have changed quite a lot. This really has been our key priority. And the key overarching goal of the government has been to actually, by doing this, transform Serbian economy from the investment driven, and that's mostly labor intensive investment driven, to innovation driven, which we thought is really the best way to increase our GDP, make our growth much more dynamic, keep young, talented people in the country, and really just change our destiny. So in those respects, also the two key priorities that we had was, one was reform of the public administration and the introduction of electronic government. Simply put, it's basically every service that government can provide electronically to citizen or business should be electronic, or in addition to old-fashioned way, it should also be electronic. And secondly, it was reform of education. And the reform of education was initially thought as kind of the cornerstone of all of our reforms. But as part of it, we've started introducing digital classrooms, digital textbooks, which, 4 years later enabled us to, when the crisis struck, to actually, when it was necessary, to immediately go online with schools. And I think we were the only country in Europe that did not lose one single day of school. When we saw that the numbers are increasing, it wasn't safe anymore for kids to be in school. We finalized the classes on Friday afternoon, and then Monday morning we were already online, as everyone was already online, and that's how we finalized the school year. Now, as of 1st of September, school is again ongoing with some of the changes. We have both online and kids are at the same time also in school, and it's going so far so good. But these kind of things really, investment in technology really helped us cope with COVID crisis quite well. And lastly, and not to take too much of your time, which is I think equally important, is that the investment we made into technology, into our startup ecosystems, paid off because it has become the fastest growing sector of our economy. And it reached in 2019 6% of our total GDP. Even with the COVID crisis, this sector has continued to grow modestly at 4.5%, but still grow and employ people. So if we didn't do this, our economy would be impacted much more adversely right now. So all of our investment has paid off, and we are really determined to continue on this path, and hopefully with the new government that is that we are supposed to have in Serbia by 3rd of November, because we just had parliamentary elections. I'm sure that this will continue to be a priority.
Thank you. I mean, you open up so many interesting subjects, and let's just spend a moment on the education issue that you talk about. And it really does sound remarkable. I know in many other countries, and you allude to this, other governments have really struggled to ensure that that education has been allowed to continue. I'd just be curious to hear what some of the challenges you faced. I assume that, like many other countries, access to broadband is not universal or equally fast everywhere in the country. How did you? Well, what do you think some of the big challenges were, particularly on the education front, and how did you overcome some of those?
Well, firstly, the fact that not all of the school children have laptops at home or personal computers, or the tools to follow online education, which is why we've done kind of quick and dirty research. We found out who are who are the kids that do not have these tools, and we provided donated computers to them. Unfortunately, there weren't that many. Second issue, as you said, is a broadband, and we now have one of the key priorities going forward is that broadband is available all over the country. Right now, the coverage of our broadband is about 65%. And fortunately, what we've done in the past 4 years is one of the goals, and one of the things that we've done as part of the reform of our education was to introduce broadband in all of our schools. So almost 2/3 of our schools were covered as well. But companies like Telekom Serbia, which are still state-owned, these systems help us enormously by providing internet to all of those families and kids where they did not have high-quality internet for this. So we managed to do this. But having said that, I have to say that it has to be done in a much more systematic manner, and that's what we need to do going forward. Otherwise, really, the education worked very, very well. And also, which is really, I think, worthwhile mentioning as an advice to other countries, as part of the e-government. One thing is classes in itself, online education, but the other thing is the enrollment to school, the ability for parents to look at their children's grades, communicate with their teachers and professors. And all of that, in our case, has been previously done electronically. So, for example, this year, the full enrollment into kindergartens, primary, and to secondary schools was enabled completely electronically. So neither kids nor the parents had to physically go to school and bring papers which will prove that they can now enroll that school. That's all electronic. And so basically the life in that respect continued as normal. Before that, we have introduced into school something that's called kind of e-administration or e-diaries, where basically parents can go online and look at their children's grades, communicate with their teachers, get comments about their work. So all of that has already been prepared as if we were expecting a crisis like this one. But actually, the investment has been made for completely different purposes, and that's to increase the efficiency, increase the transparency, and then prepare kids for the 21st century and the jobs of the future. But it really paid off.
It's hugely impressive for you to have led this effort. You mentioned the importance of the digital economy in Serbia and the growth of the startups and the extent to which that prepared you well for this moment. And as you know, a theme of the GovTech Summit is exactly that, the extent to which startups are able to work with governments. And I'd just be curious to hear, how that worked in Serbia. Did you find that many startups were able to more easily engage with public officials? And in turn, how did public officials react? Because any government will have a range. Some are very forward-leaning and excited to work with new companies, and others are a bit more cautious and maybe risk-averse. So how did you find that take place?
Initially, and this is regardless of COVID crisis, initially I think our startups were very skeptical of working with the government or of government trying to help with the startup community because they were afraid that we are going to interfere in the sector, and that the sector that is booming, the government will really just by acting as an elephant in the small shop, will in trying to help out, will do everything that does not need to be done, and will basically hinder their growth. And we were very, very careful about that, and we haven't done anything without consulting with the private sector, startups, innovation companies, to understand what their issues are, and also for them to recommend solutions. And then we would basically, as decision makers, really just implement those solutions that were recommended by them. So I would say that the sector, which is probably booming in most of other countries because it's just the time that we live in, which was prior to 2016, growing at an amazing 10% annually. Since 2016, when we started working with them and really put this as a key priority of the government, has been growing at a rate that is 20+% annually growth rate, which is, again, just unbelievable. If you compare, for example, our IT exports from 2016 to 2019, the increase is 92%. So there is a lot that the government can actually do if it's smart and listens to startup companies, innovation companies, private sector, and does not think that we know better than they do what needs to be done. So that's my advice for everyone. And again, during the COVID.
No, let's just focus on this issue because it's so important. We had a panel earlier talking about upskilling government with the head of the Royal Navy and the British Cabinet Office, talking about the importance of upskilling public officials so they can engage in a different way. How have you gone about doing that in Serbia? Because I can imagine that for a lot of people in the Serbian administration, dealing with these new and innovative companies with t-shirt wearing founders and sneaker wearing employees might be a little bit countercultural to what they've been used to until now.
No, absolutely. It was very difficult in the beginning, both ways. It was difficult, as I said, because the private sector was very, very skeptical, and on the other hand, I think that there wasn't really a sense in the general public, but also in the public administration and with the politicians, that this is a real sector. If you said, well, one of our booming industries is video gaming, they would think that you're crazy, but you would sit down with, as you say, a kind of a crazy t-shirt wearing young woman who has a video gaming company, and you would be like, very patronizing. That's fantastic. How many people do you employ? And she would say 138. And that's when people have started realizing that this is a sector that really very few people understood is so important and can be such a generator for our country's growth. Little by little, that has changed. And I think today there is not one person in Serbia, both in the public administration, on the part of kind of political elites, and in public in general, who doubts that this is where our future is. It was a process, but it was a process in which, as the Prime Minister, I've always tried to emphasize good examples of companies that we have, such as Nordeus, which is one of the most popular, best video gaming companies in Europe and one of the best in the world. Seven Bridges, which has been proclaimed as one of the 50 smartest companies in the world. Institutes such as Biosas Institute, which has been proclaimed to be a European Center of Excellence in Digital Agriculture. So all of these things looked fun in the beginning to our public at large, but then the perceptions started changing, and today I think we have this synergy where everyone actually, now the pressure is different. The pressure on us is to go faster and enable even more business-friendly environment for these people. One of the key challenges was, for example, with VC funds. We are used to, we as the economy, as the country, we're used to a very traditional models of financing and access to finance. Not VC funds, not business angels, and we had to basically just adopt a whole set of laws allowing venture capital funds in Serbia. And what we are doing right now is the new law, or the law on digital rights and crypto values and all of these things. And for example, when we are talking about it now, no one laughs. Everyone thinks, well, even if I don't understand, there's probably something to it. So I would say that the government, there's skepticism both ways. But the people in leadership positions, such as myself, prime ministers or deputy prime minister, someone who recognizes that this really is a huge growth potential and is a really game changer for any country, especially smaller countries like mine. They need to be persistent. They need to believe in this and push that agenda forward.
Now, clearly, you've been a cheerleader, and I noticed the recent adoption of an AI strategy. We can come back to that later, but I just wonder, because we've both sort of talked positively about some of the great change that has happened, the beneficial change that has happened. But I wonder also if we can take a step back and say, okay, in the course of this crisis, you had a number of positive developments, but I'm curious to hear what disappointed you with technology. You have not yet rolled out a COVID symptom app. Germany was very quick to do so, but of course experienced some problems. The UK has taken a longer time and has also been criticized. So lots of countries have had to battle with this, and I'd just be curious to hear your views on that. And more broadly, what have you found disappointing when you have faced this crisis and hoped that technology would be supportive of your efforts?
Well, firstly, it's I have to say it's about the human rights and protection of privacy, and I'm still struggling with that. We have had ready the contact tracing application, the COVID application. We have it ready now for some time, but we are still not releasing it. Firstly, because I'm really not sure, and this is where I think humanities and social sciences can help us and have a huge role to play in. In situations like this one, where technology can really help. Where it does, where is the red line of when do you start interfering in someone else's privacy and personal freedoms? Because what we have traditionally been thought is that personal freedom is basically the borderline of your personal freedom is the borderline of someone else's personal freedom. But this time, at the time of the COVID crisis or similar crisis, it's that's very tricky because someone else's freedom might endanger you. And so that is something that I think is up for debate, and we should all be dealing with it simply because I think at that point in time, technology can help hugely. But as we have seen in some other countries, people don't want to download that technology because they see it as their privacy invasion. And if we resolve this problem between technology and social sciences and humanities and personal freedoms and liberties, I think that we could use technology much more efficiently. Secondly,
I mean,
is
also,
obviously
let's just stop on this one because it's such a rich topic, and it does strike me that that a lot depends on the design of of the systems in place. Clearly, lots of governments have opted for the Google and Apple setup, which is deemed more privacy respecting. And I just noticed that in the UK, after only a week of releasing the app, 10 million people have downloaded. I say that because the UK is a country, I should say England, sorry, the England app. Because in England, I think people would pride themselves exactly as you say about their skepticism of being traced by the government. Yet nonetheless, I think this crisis is beginning to change people's maybe acceptance, while there's an increasing understanding that maybe some of these technologies are being managed in a privacy respecting way. And I guess my question is, do you think that in Serbia, people are more or less worried about their privacy, or do they understand more or less the rules of the GDPR, which you have transplanted into your own legislation?
I'll tell you one thing which is probably not very popular to say for my own country, but I shared that feature of us Serbs, and that is that we are very, very prone to conspiracy theories. We love conspiracy theories, and those kind of apps really help that. They help nurture those kind of conspiracy theories. So I think we will launch the application in Serbia. But I'm afraid that not many people will actually download it. We will see. However, we, for example, had the application ready in end of May, early June, but our parliamentary elections and local elections were scheduled to take place and took place on the 21st of June. And so we couldn't really launch the application because I think majority of the people would actually think that we've done that to see whether they voted or not. So that's why we kind of put that on hold. And so that's the danger, I think, in that.
But there's an important role. So I was just going to say there's an important role for not just politicians, but technology entrepreneurs, by public officials, to talk openly about some of the trade-offs and challenges and argue for the benefits. And I would just say that in the countries where there has been more of an open debate, where there's been a greater sense of public trust, Denmark, Germany, and so on, there's a much wider adoption of some of these. So there's a real role for, if you will, the sort of elites to create an open conversation and acknowledge some of the trade-offs that exist.
Absolutely, I could not agree more, and that's a task ahead of us, and that's something that we will have to do. We will have to learn how to communicate sometimes differently with the public, and how to use different stakeholders to promote the same agenda, even though, for example, we politically disagree. So that is something that I've already thought about, and certainly something that will be one of the key tasks and challenges ahead of us. But the same thing is, for example, when we talk about 5G. There is this really worldwide spread skepticism about 5G, and I know as the Prime Minister that I'm faced with a huge challenge, because 5G is extremely important, especially for startup community, for research, new developments. But if you even mention 5G right now in Serbia, people will think that, they believe, a lot of them believe in that story of Wuhan and 5G, and that 5G is to blame for COVID and whatnot. So again, we need to have a very wide debate and find a way to communicate this, so that on that front we stay united. And when I say we stay united, I do not mean the government, or I mean the government, the academia, the businesses, the civil society organizations, and obviously there will always be people who will be against that and still skeptical, and still pro conspiracy theories. But we need a much more united front to defend these applications or innovation.
It's a fascinating subject, because I think you'll agree that the coronavirus has become a sort of brilliant petri dish of all these conspiracy theories. Disinformation, which obviously has been around for thousands of years, has now gotten kind of digital legs in a way that we just haven't seen before. At the same time, we're seeing more and more synthetic production of material, whether that's video or voice. So it's kind of unclear what's right and what's not right. And I think it brings a fascinating question to the fore for senior decision makers like you. What is the government's role in regulating technology that could harm, in ensuring that disinformation is combated, but in a way that feels impartial? It's a really thorny problem, especially in the run-up to elections. You've just had yours. In America, there's one coming shortly. As a senior decision maker, you see all this happening. You say yourself, there's a sort of tendency to believe in conspiracy theories. You know how detrimental it'll be to some of the policy objectives that you have. How do you deal with that?
I think the right way, but certainly the most difficult way, is to empower people, and to for Serbia, one of the priorities, as I said, was the reform of education, and the whole mantra was not to teach kids what to think, but how to think. And if we manage that, then we have generations that are ready for the future that is ahead of us. So in addition to, for example, what we've done in Serbia, in addition to introducing programming and coding in primary schools since the 5th grade, when kids are 11 years old, which is important, not because all of them will become IT specialists, but because when you teach them coding, you teach them algorithm way of thinking. So they learn how to think, how to resolve problems, and they're not afraid to try out something new. In addition to that, as of this year, so as of the 1st of September, we have introduced the subject that is called Digital World. And that's the subject that kids are starting to learn when they enter primary school, so when they're 7 years old. And that is where we hope we will be able to form new generations that will basically learn to adapt to digital world, understand for themselves how to think, what is fake news, what's not fake news, understand how to fight, for example, digital bullying and digital violence. And certainly that's not the whole of solutions, but in today's world, I think relying on individuals, one single individual's common sense will go a long way into fighting all of this, conspiracy theories and different things. And then certainly legislation, but it's very, very tough and it's a fine line when you try to put some kind of a legal framework and limitations to technology. To what extent can you do it without actually breaching the human rights, the right of speech and the right of expression? So one thing which I think would perhaps make sense, but that's just my idea, and not sure whether in what sense that could, but that needs to be kind of an international effort. Is that for example, people the social networks should register with their real names rather than nicknames, because unfortunately I think social networks are kind of almost the root cause of increased verbal violence, which then really goes on into just creating an unhealthy atmosphere in society. So I think if people were by their name, surname, would be more careful about what they write to each other and to other individuals in terms of threats, but
No,
also.
it's definitely a challenge, but I also think, as you know, in your case, policymakers, and in my case, people on the outside, we have to acknowledge that anonymity also helps lots of different movements, protest movements and human rights movements. For example, in current day Belarus, allows people to engage in lawful civic protest without being spied on by government. So it's a real tension. You mentioned 5G, and it's very hard in Europe today to talk about 5G without at the same time, talking about what is a real conflict between China and America, about control of, if you will, tomorrow's digital infrastructure. And many countries are finding themselves caught in that battle. Countries like Germany and I'd be curious to hear your perspective, because Serbia, like many other countries, finds itself with good relations both with China and the United States, and has taken a lot of investment from both countries, including into your digital infrastructure. So how do you balance that tension?
To return to your previous question and your comment, I think you're exactly right on the anonymity that is important for today's world, and that's why it's such a sophisticated issue, and one which really, we need to tread carefully on that. But overall, in general, I believe that with this fantastic rise in technology, the time has come to build more synergies between technology and humanities, between technology and social sciences, to address those kind of questions. I think it'd be great for all of us. I'm sure that it's something that we will try to do in Serbia, to get answers to questions like that one. On the 5G question, as you have said, I think not many countries, but I think most of the countries in the world are caught in between the clash between the US and China on 5G, which is also a little bit strange, knowing that really I don't think that the US currently has the technology for 5G. So the technology, I think, for which they are advocating more or less right now is a European technology, which again is good for you. Which is good for Europe, because it shows that Europe does not need to lag behind China and the US. That when focused, Europe can also be at the forefront, and I think it's really something that Europe should pick up on and understand that there is a huge opportunity, and what they need is a little bit more courage. Serbia is a small country. We are trying very, very hard not to be in the way of giants, I would say, which is difficult in today's world. But look, different countries have opted for different technologies. We are carefully monitoring the development in that area, and we'll decide on the basis of first and foremost what's best for Serbian entrepreneurs and our science, research and development. Secondly, for our citizens, obviously, and businesses in terms of pricing. And thirdly, obviously, what is politically favorable or possible solution. So it's going to be a tough one, I have to say.
Interesting challenge for you ahead. Just as we're coming towards the end of our conversation, I'd be curious to hear kind of what your plans are going into the future. You've graced us here at the GovTech Summit today, but also you came last year. I know that finding ways for technology to transform Serbia's public administration has been high on your priority. We've heard a little bit about it, but I'd be curious to hear, so what's next? What are we going to hear when you hopefully come back to the GovTech Summit in 2021?
Well, as I said, first and foremost, the new Serbian government should be formed by 3rd of November. So we will see who will be the prime minister. I might stay as the prime minister. Someone else might come in as the prime minister, but I will certainly stay involved in determining the priorities of the future government. In that respect, I don't think anything will change in Serbia. As this government has done its work in terms of really setting the foundation stone for even more substantial reforms and in even more efficient manner. So I truly believe that the next 4 years will be key for Serbia for development, and really, as you said at the beginning, kind of identifying Serbia as the country which bases its economic growth and social development on innovation and new technologies. But I can tell you now that the next big thing is, again, as you said, AI. We have adopted the AI strategy in Serbia. We are the first country in this part of Europe to adopt such a strategy. Only 26th country in the world to adopt this strategy. And the next big thing is that we will open an AI institute in Serbia. It's going to be one of the few institutes in Serbia which are established by the government together with the private sector and academia. And so I expect a lot from that. And to begin the implementation of our AI strategy, we have provided funds, 2.4 million euros, not a lot, but kind of pilot program through our National Science Fund for projects for AI projects. So this is certainly something that we will keep pushing in, and I see that as the next level, certainly even for government services. We have introduced e-government. The next level is to really reduce this kind of boring and stupid workload by introducing AI and then having the manpower to actually do something that's more creative for the citizens of Serbia, regardless on which level of public service you work.
Well, Prime Minister, it's been fascinating to hear, and I do hope that you will return in some capacity next year, where we can take stock of the extent to which I
hope I get the invitation, even if I'm not the Prime Minister. So,
for sure, Prime Minister, you'd be very welcome to join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hvala puno to everybody else. Thank you so much for joining us here at the last Fireside Chat with the Serbian Prime Minister, where we've talked a bit about how technology has helped the Serbian nation deal with the coronavirus. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.